The Turing Test is a short little game made by Bulkhead Interactive and published by Square Enix, released in August of 2016. It's a short first-person puzzle game that has a futuristic and sci-fi theme. It's a game that I got on a 50% discount half a year after it was released, and I think my money was well spent, or at least I thought it was nearly 7 years later when I finally played through the game. You see, like everyone else, I've bought games years ago and never really played them or even got my money's worth. Well, I'm trying to be better about that and have made myself a backlog. That being said, the Turing Test was on my backlog, and man, I'm glad I played it. The gameplay might as well be the game's weak point, in my opinion. It's fine. It's nothing super special. It doesn't really go outside of the box in terms of mechanics. It's certainly not Portal or any of its community-made mods. The gameplay is pretty simple. For a good 70% of the game, most mechanics are just slotting energy balls into the right spot and order. It's been a while since I've played the Talos Principle, but the Turing Test's mechanics seem comparable to the earlier puzzles of the Talos Principle instead of the aforementioned king of the genre, Portal. There's not really any chambers that involve height as a mechanic, and there really isn't any momentum usage. It's fairly grounded throughout most of the game. When solving chambers, I didn't really feel creative or inventive like other first-person puzzle games, despite one line of dialogue that kind of stuck with me.
Okay, so you could solve these tests, but in a terrible fashion. Can you think of a solution to this one?
Chop off your arm and leave it on the button. That way the door will stay open.
Yeah, that's not a great solution.
You threw the box through the window. Perhaps we could throw you through the window.
Actually, Tom, I think I'm okay for help.
Right you are.
Don't get me wrong, the chambers were fun, but they felt a little too streamlined. Honestly, maybe they were the right amount of difficulty. I didn't struggle much, if any, with most puzzles, but the game didn't seem to waste my time. It was rewarding to consistently make it through most puzzles without any moments of brute forcing or confusion. The game just had a flow to it. It took me around 5 hours to beat the game, just in line with how long to beat's ranking, so it's pretty quick. Thankfully, each chapter of the game has an additional optional test chamber that I felt obligated to get, partially for achievement's sake, partially just to scratch my completion itch. These additional puzzles were each enjoyable in their own right and brought something pretty unique to the table. These puzzles were at least a little out of the box, and one stumped me for a while, mostly because I was confident it was bugged, but really I was just wrong. Each chapter's additional tests are optional and fairly difficult to miss, but once completed have a fairly unique reward that shows off some concepts mentioned within the dialogue, or explores some lore, or even the one weird one in chapter 3 that furthered my interest in the game and convinced me to do this video. I'll get to all of these later in their own section. It's been long enough in the video where I need to talk about the elephant in the room. AI. The AI elephant. No, that's stupid. Don't leave that in the video. Alright, so who here knows what the Turing Test is? Cool? No one? The Turing Test is basically a thought experiment, or test, to prove whether or not something is human. The most popular version of the Turing Test consists of a person talking to a subject within a room and deciding if the subject is a human or an AI based on its responses. You can try this with your friends at home and see if they are an AI that came from the future a la Terminator, or if they are in fact normal. The game takes the basis of the Turing Test and expands upon it by bringing up the other half of said thought experiment, the Chinese room test, which states that if someone who does not speak Chinese were to be in a room with a translation book with set responses, they could respond to an interviewer in Chinese, but not necessarily grasp the language. This relates back to the Turing Test, as AI can try to respond to humans normally, but when asked about things that would be more abstract to an AI, like emotions, the AI could theoretically respond in a way that seems human, but not really know what it's talking about.
They are using an instruction book inside of the room to respond to a Chinese speaker outside of the room. Yes?
Yes.
This means they are following the instructions in a book. This is a set of rules, principles, and processes. This is called syntax. To the person in the Chinese room, they are just symbols like any others.
Okay.
But that's different from semantics. Semantics define what things mean. Our thoughts have meaning. They represent things. English speakers know what the word home means, and they know how it is different from the word house.
So what?
Programs don't have semantics. Programs only have syntax. Though an increasing syntax can imitate a mind, that does not make it a mind, even if it does pass the Turing Test.
For a relevant example, the Chinese room test could be something like exclusively using ChatGPT to pass your finals and become a doctor. You'll accomplish your goal of becoming a doctor, sure, but, well, I don't think I really need to say how that's a bad thing when you don't know your practice is one of the most important jobs in any society. I wish I could say a little bit more about this game's cultural relevance during this AI boom, but nothing really covered by the game relates too much to the current uses of AI other than the Chinese room experiment. So the game has a couple of thought experiments scattered about, but how does it execute them and blend them into gameplay? Or how does it utilize these in the story? Well, that's the funny part. It doesn't really. It's kind of just there to teach you about those concepts and give you an understanding about some inherent weaknesses and disadvantages of how an artificially intelligent mind works. Ironically, one of the things that the game doesn't explain is its ending, which in my opinion is one of the best parts, as long as you choose to only accept my one canon ending. But first, I can't tell you the ending without at least a brief summary of the story. Essentially, you, Ava Turing, yeah, I know it's a stupid name, are awoken from cryosleep on Jupiter's moon, Europa, and tasked by an AI named Tom to find crew members who went missing. After progressing through several chambers, Tom tells you that the crew isolated themselves away from Tom after finding a discovery that essentially is the fountain of youth. This discovery was an organism that can endlessly repair DNA, thus making any living thing immortal. Something that definitely sounds too good to be true. That would definitely carry some inherent negatives, like ruining the Earth's ecosystem. That being said, Ava thinks she should help her crew, while Tom, following its programming, must prevent the crew from going home and spreading their discovery, causing the inherent downsides of immortality for humans and viruses alike to wreak havoc on Earth.
They found. This is why we have to stop them leaving Europa, Ava.
What is it?
Mostly extremophiles. Tiny single-cellular life. It can never leave Europa. It could potentially destroy Earth's ecosystem if it were ever introduced.
Eventually, when you finish about 70% of the puzzles, you gain access to a new ability where you can control a machine if Ava can see it from where she is standing. This new ability adds a very welcomed element to the puzzles this late into the game, as well as some lines of dialogue regarding free will.
I do not understand your obsession with free will. Researchers have found that the subconscious makes decisions up to 10 seconds before your conscious mind becomes aware of it. So, we know that free will is nothing but an illusion. I cannot steal your free will, because it does not exist. I can, however, influence your subconscious to make the right decisions. That is not wrong.
The introduction of this new ability is interesting to say the least. It's as if you're both playing as Tom and Ava. You lose control of most movement of Ava and are forced to move forward into a box that nullifies a neural implant that all crew members had. You know, just your average sci-fi horrors. This is important to note for the final section of the game. After completing the final chamber, Ava now follows a set path as you are exclusively playing as Tom, hopping from camera to camera. This coincides with Ava joining her lost crewmate Sarah to shut down Tom so they can go back home with their new discovery in tow. When Tom's set path ends, you land in a control room controlling a mounted turret. So, it's up to you, the player, to either let Ava and Sarah shut down Tom, and to take the organism to Earth, dooming humanity to immortality and to constantly reproducing immortal diseases, viruses, sicknesses, and the like, or to kill Ava and Sarah, preventing the discovery from ever entering Earth's atmosphere. So, you have 4 different choices. Leave both crew members alive to shut down Tom, prevent the crew members from living onwards, or sparing either Ava or Sarah. The game will not give you a fail state for letting the crew shut you down, or for preventing them from living. But we'll always show you the credits and say, congratulations, you have passed the Turing test. To me, the only true ending is the one where you choose to kill both Ava and Sarah. The first law of robotics, established by fiction writer Isaac Asimov, states that a robot shall not harm a human, or, by inaction, allow a human to come to harm. Knowing this and experiencing the true ending, as I call it, Tom, the AI, is faced with a dilemma, a paradox if you will. He must either kill the crew in self-defense and to stop them from more than likely dooming humanity with immortal diseases and viruses, or allow the crew to take the organism back to Earth, causing highly probable irreparable damage to the human race and Earth's ecosystem. Choosing the ending in which you spare none of the crew, Tom potentially saves humanity only at the cost of 2 crew members. This ending makes the "you have passed the Turing Test" message so much more relevant. It was almost enough to give me goosebumps. The only real downside to this ending of the game, in my opinion, is the lack of knowledge provided earlier in the game. The game never explicitly states Isaac Asimov's first law, and only loosely hints at Tom's moral syntax. For a game that often brings up robotic philosophy and thought experiments like the titular Turing Test, the writers probably didn't know about the laws of robotics, or they just forgot about them entirely. It really seems like a missed opportunity to A, not mention the first law, and B, to not lock the game to have only one ending. In my opinion, the best way, other than locking away other endings behind fail states, would be to have all other endings give a message like, "Oops, you've doomed humanity," instead of the universal, "You've passed the Turing Test." I do need to admit, the ending still does make sense, even when you don't go for my preferred ending. Sparing one crew member could represent Tom realizing that killing is wrong after doing it, thus allowing the remaining crew to shut him down. Changing one's mind based on emotional aftermath seems counterintuitive and unnatural to AI. Sparing both crewmates is still a paradoxical decision that would likely go against Tom's programming, thus somewhat making him pass a Turing test. Or I'm overthinking the ending. Maybe it really means you've beaten the game, the Turing test. Congratulations. To be fair, the goal of the game is never to prove that Tom is an AI, so why should the ending represent that at all, right? We never truly participated in a Turing test of any type, so why would the game, no matter its conclusion, say that you specifically passed a Turing test when you never took one? Whatever. Forget all of that stuff. The ending is super lame when it's essentially the "thank you for playing" message. At the end of the day, the game needs the double meaning for the ending quote, because if it doesn't, it really seems like a letdown compared to what I experienced. So after going back through my footage and editing, I realized that the letdown of an ending is real. There was never any intent of a double meaning. I just forgot about a decently important bit of dialogue.
I do not want anyone here to die, but I cannot let anyone leave. If it comes to it, I am permitted to use lethal force.
And the implications of a roof-mounted turret in the control room. However, we can pretend that this bit of dialogue never happened, as it just makes the ending extremely disappointing and uninteresting. I honestly debated making this whole section in the video, but after some consideration, I really wanted to talk about some of the game's optional tests. Although some tests are simple, and some rewards are lackluster to me personally, I still wanted to cover all of them. So here they are. I'll keep it brief, I don't want to waste too much of your time. Optional 1 is one of the quickest puzzles in the game. The problem is knowing the answer. Now, when starting Optional 1, you're presented with a 5x5 grid and 2 nodes. You can brute force it, or you can find the solution later in the game. Upon the puzzle's completion, you'll find a marked grave belonging to a child that crew member Sarah would have had on mission. Something established in other optional logs I'll get to later. Optional 2 is a quick chamber. You need to cross a light bridge, but the bridge is turned off when you move too fast. Crouching speed is just slow enough to both move and keep the light bridge on. Now, Optional 2 provides the most interesting reward of all optional chambers. Upon completion, you sit in front of a computer and are asked questions that would typically be asked in a Turing test of sorts. At first, you can normally respond, but after a couple of answers, the computer automatically converts your inputs to confess to being a robot. It's nothing revolutionary, but dang, it made me want to keep playing the game. My expectations weren't high or anything, but I don't know. The little minigame, if you could even call it that, was something unexpected and really cool, all things considered. Also, this might allude to the neural implant point in the game's plot, where Tom is revealed to somewhat be in control of Ava's actions. Optional Chamber 3 is kind of out of the box, because, well, its solution requires you to be out of line of sight using boxes. Like Optional 2, line of sight is not used before this chamber, or anywhere else in the game. After finishing Optional 3, you come to a computer, and upon interaction, it forces your perspective into the computer, and for a short segment, the game plays like a fever dream. It was a unique experience that I did not expect from the game. It turns out that this perspective shift was a throwback and reference to Numa Breath of Life, Bulkhead's first game. Like the previous two optional chambers, Optional 4 uses a mechanic that will only appear once in the game, momentum. You drop a box down a staircase so you can make it through some doors before the box lands on a button to close them. After solving the puzzle, you'll find audio logs that cover some lore and interactions on the ship while you were in cryosleep. Sarah and Mikhail talk about Sarah's pregnancy and how the conditions on Europa will not be suitable for a child to be born. Tom and Daniel talk about the organism and whether or not to bring it back to Earth, as well as giving a reason for Ava's release from cryosleep. Optional 5 uses green and purple orbs that toggle at alternating intervals. After solving a few doors worth of puzzles, you will reach some logs of Tom trying to argue in defense of his consciousness.
If it waddles like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck.
And a chamber with Chinese text to imply a live testing of the Chinese room test. If you like discussions of consciousness earlier in the dialogue of the game, you'll probably enjoy it here too. Optional 6 took me longer than I'd like to admit, and one of its solutions did not make sense to me. Either way, this chamber consists of multiple puzzles that make use of and, or, not, and nor logic gates. The last puzzle here was all AND gates, but I had as many orbs as I could slotted in, so I guess I missed something, or I'm just dumb. Hindsight says that I wasn't looking close enough, and kinda am dumb. Anyway, once you solve this chamber, you unlock a room with paintings and excerpts of text depicting the Greek myth of Europa, the same name of the moon in which you're stationed. Finally, Optional Chamber 7 requires the player to think outside of the box again, but this time by using the outside of the box to hold open a door. Once you get to the end of the puzzle, you are presented with several texts. I think that the context of these texts are what inspired the devs to make the game, or at least inspired some ideas present. Most texts reference thought experiments and consciousness. These sources include The Mystery of Consciousness in Exchange by Daniel C. Dennett, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence by Alan Turing, a piece from philosopher John Searle, and Genesis 2:7 from the King James Bible. The Turing Test's optional puzzles honestly added a lot to my experience with the game. Each one is unique in both gameplay and reward. Honestly, if you care about the lore of the game, or just interesting things that weren't included in the main puzzles and story, the optional tests should be played. They really increased my own enjoyment of the game, as well as its philosophical impact. The Turing Test is no Portal by any means, but it has its own qualities that make it unique. The game offers a pretty solid 5 hours that's streamlined with creative decisions, references to thought experiments, and fairly interesting dialogue. The only real negatives of the game, in my opinion, were the other optional endings and some of the puzzle's consistent trivial difficulty. I'd honestly say the game is worth it at $10 when it's 50% off, but it has gone on sale lower, just not recently. If the game sounds interesting and I didn't completely spoil the experience, I'd recommend it. Otherwise, it's still an alright game to get on a deep sale, if it ever goes on one again. That's pretty much all I have to say about the game. I hope you liked the video. If the game seems like it might be fun to watch, I also made a playthrough of it on my second channel, Trophytroll 2. And yeah, this is the part of the video where I shamelessly promote my gaming channel and tell you all to like, comment, subscribe, etc. It doesn't take much time, shows that my content is at least worth someone's time, promotes my stuff on the platform, and makes these uploads more rewarding, even if they sometimes take longer than I want them to. Anyway, that's it for me. Until next time, later days.